In a quiet corner of a bustling city, Michael Johnson, a well-respected district attorney, entered a small cafe. He wanted nothing more than a moment of peace to enjoy his coffee after a grueling day in court. But today, his life was about to take an unexpected turn. What started as a simple misunderstanding would become a public confrontation that exposed the cracks in the justice system. This is a story about power, prejudice, and a fight for dignity that would change everything. Michael Johnson had spent over 10 years fighting for justice. At 35, he was young but carried a maturity earned through years of hard work and countless cases. He was tall, with a strong, athletic build and a face that reflected both kindness and resilience. His rich brown skin and neatly trimmed hair gave him an air of quiet confidence. Today, he was dressed in a tailored dark suit with a casual jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, hoping to blend in and avoid attention. As Michael sipped his coffee, steam curled up from the cup, filling the air with a comforting aroma. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the drink ease the tension in his shoulders. He was used to stressful situations, but today he felt particularly drained. All he wanted was a brief escape from the pressures of his job. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere of the cafe was shattered. The door swung open with a loud clang, and police officers walked in, talking loudly. Their voices were brash, cutting through the quiet murmur of the other customers. Michael glanced up, feeling a sense of unease settle in his stomach. He had seen this kind of scenario play out before, only this time he was the target. The officers' eyes scanned the room before locking onto Michael. Their expressions were a mix of suspicion and thinly veiled contempt. Without hesitation, they walked straight toward him, their footsteps heavy and deliberate. Michael's heart began to beat a little faster, but he maintained his composure. Years of dealing with tense situations had taught him to keep his cool, even when provoked. Officer Jackson, a tall man with a broad build, smirked as he stood uncomfortably close to Michael. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Let me see your ID," Jackson demanded, his tone filled with an arrogant authority. Michael looked up calmly, meeting Jackson's gaze. "Is there a reason you need to see my identification?" he asked, keeping his voice polite but firm. He knew he had done nothing wrong, and he wasn't about to be intimidated. Jackson scoffed, clearly enjoying the chance to assert his power. "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for," he said dismissively, not even trying to make the lie believable. The other officer, standing slightly behind Jackson, gave Michael a look that was both challenging and expectant, as if daring him to resist. Michael handed over his ID without a word, deciding it was best to cooperate for now. He watched as Jackson barely glanced at the card before exchanging a mocking look with his partner. They were clearly not interested in who he really was. To them, he was just another face in the crowd, an opportunity to flex their authority. "District Attorney, huh?" Jackson said with a fake laugh, waving the ID as though it were a meaningless piece of paper. "Sure, and I'm the mayor," he added sarcastically. His partner chuckled, enjoying the show. "Look," Michael said calmly, though irritation was beginning to creep into his voice. "I am the district attorney. I'm here off duty, just having a coffee." "There's no need for this," but his words fell on deaf ears. The officers weren't interested in the truth. They were looking for a confrontation, and they had decided that Michael was an easy target. Without warning, Jackson pulled out a pair of handcuffs and snapped them onto Michael's wrists with unnecessary force. The metal bit into his skin, and Michael winced, feeling a wave of humiliation wash over him. Around them, the cafe patrons watched in stunned silence. A few people whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Several customers reached for their phones, starting to record the scene. The officers didn't seem to care. In fact, they seemed to relish the attention. Michael's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. He had dealt with many cases of police misconduct before, but he had never imagined he would be on the receiving end of it. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He knew that reacting with anger would only make things worse. "Is this really necessary?" Michael asked, looking directly at Jackson. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now. "You're making a big mistake." Jackson leaned in closer, his face twisted into a sneer. "The only mistake here is you thinking you're above the law," he said quietly, his voice filled with contempt. Before Michael could respond, a voice from the back of the cafe cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" It was a cafe employee, a young man who had seen Michael many times before. He looked between the officers and Michael, clearly confused and concerned. "He didn't do anything," the employee said, stepping forward. "I've seen him here plenty of times. He's a good guy." Jackson shot the employee a warning look. "Stay out of this, kid. It's police business," he barked. But the young man wasn't deterred. He glanced at Michael, then quickly slipped into the back room, pulling out his phone to make a call. Within minutes, word of the incident spread, and several of Michael's colleagues began arriving at the cafe, their faces a mix of shock and outrage. As the room filled with lawyers and legal professionals, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The officers, who had been so smug and confident moments before, started to look uneasy. One by one, the lawyers stepped forward, showing their IDs and demanding an explanation. "Release him now," one lawyer said, his voice cold and authoritative. "You have no grounds for this." Jackson hesitated, his eyes darting between the growing crowd of attorneys. The realization of what he had done started to sink in. He fumbled with the handcuffs, finally removing them as Michael stood up, rubbing his sore wrists. Michael looked directly at the officers, his gaze steady and filled with quiet fury. "You abused your power," he said, his voice ringing out clearly. "You acted on racial bias and humiliated an innocent man. This is more than a mistake, it's a violation of everything the law stands for." The officers stood there, pale and visibly shaken. They tried to offer excuses, but the damage was already done. Videos of the incident spread rapidly on social media, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Michael didn't stop there. He launched a full investigation into the officers' conduct, making it clear that he wouldn't let this slide. He knew this wasn't just about his own dignity, it was about fighting against the systemic bias he had seen throughout his career. In the end, the officers were stripped of their badges and forced to issue a public apology. The incident became a turning point, a powerful reminder that no one is above the law, not even those who are supposed to enforce it. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Unfolded Tales Explained. Hit the bell icon so you never miss another story that exposes hidden truths and challenges injustice.